2.5 years ago, I was working as a journalist, studying for my master's in philosophy of science, and living in a house share in the south of Tel Aviv with a broken roof, still finding it very, very much impossible to pay the rent, even though I worked for about 10 to 12 hours a day. One day my housemate came to me and said that there was an event on Facebook with a bunch of people who wanted to protest the high cost of housing. We met these people in a small living room in Tel Aviv. There were 10 of them, and they were very much different from each other. Nobody knew each other. One of them was a filmmaker. The other one was an unemployed actor. There was a marketing person, and there was this activist who kept saying that we're all going to get arrested and get beaten up by the police. And they decided that instead of demonstrating, we will do something different. We'll pitch tents in one of the most posh neighborhoods of Tel Aviv, the Rothschild boulevard. Now, I have to say that I didn't have great expectations from this protest, because if you grow up in Israel, you're kind of used to protesting. It's like if in Judaism, Saturday is a day of rest, then in Israelism, Saturday is a day of protest. We protest a lot. There is a lot to protest against. But every protest, with the years, became more and more depressing, because you go to the streets, you stand in front of some empty governmental building, there is about, 50 people around you, and you can imagine that tiny cloud of rain, pouring rain just on your heads, and nothing is actually changing. But this time it was different. I remember going to work that day in the newspaper with a small tent in my backpack, and at the afternoon we just went to that boulevard, pitching the tents and waiting to see what happens. Somebody called me just a few hours later from a different city, and he said, I can't really afford going to Tel Aviv right now, but is it okay if I pitch a tent in my neighborhood? And I was like, sure, just go ahead. And within a day, there were 4 other tent camps. Within a month, there were 120 of them. 120 tent camps all around Israel, and they were crossing communities. You could see in these tents Jews and Arabs sitting together. You could see secular people and religious people sitting together. And you know what? For the first time in years, they were not talking about security, which is the only issue that you're talking about in Israel. They were talking about their day-to-day problems. They were talking about their rent, and they were talking about how hard it became to pay the bills. And they were talking about what embarrassment it was to go to the supermarket and tell your child that you can't afford this or that because you just can't this time. They were talking about their day-to-day problems, and they were sharing these problems for the very first time. We decided to go on rallies. The first time, 25,000 people showed up. The second, 150,000, and then 300,000 people, and then 500,000 people. 500,000 Israelis marching together, shouting, "The people demand social justice." Now, just to give you the proportions, 500,000 Israelis is the equivalent of 19 million Americans. So just imagine that, to have all of these people on the streets wanting the same thing. I mean, even the most pessimistic person must believe at that point that a change is possible. And I remember going to sleep that night with a huge smile on my face. And then I woke up, and there was nothing. Just absolutely nothing. The Prime Minister was talking about the same old ideas. The Parliament was actually on recess. It was like we managed to mobilize our entire society, but there was this one small group of people who didn't notice. But these people were sitting in the government. These people were the ones who were making decisions, and they just didn't care. For months, we were looking for new ways to protest. We didn't really know what was the way to take this movement forward. And prices kept going up, housing was still impossible, And many of my friends were starting to talk about leaving Israel, looking for other more comfortable places to live, to work. And one day I decided to start a journey, to ask the people what they thought was the right thing for us to do. So I started to travel from the south of Israel to the north, asking people what was the right thing for the protest, what was the right way for us to move forward. And you know, all of these people were very different from each other, but they had one thing in common. That was actually a big surprise for me. All the people who were over the age of 40 said, well, you guys just have to go into politics. That's the only way. All the people who were under the age of 40 said, whatever you do, just don't do politics. And then I realized that we have a problem. You know, we were born into a wonderful generation. We have this beautiful technology. We can do whatever we want. We can communicate in whatever language with people on the other side of the planet. We can share ideas. We mobilized from 2011 and to the next 2 years, we mobilized millions of people all around the world, from Egypt to Chile to the US, here in Israel, everywhere. But for some reason, we're all very afraid to go into that place where policy is being made. We were educated to be afraid of that. We were trained to think that politics is bad for us, that it's very uncool, that it's full of corrupt people who are disconnected from their societies. And we didn't want to do that. But you know what? Even if we will have the best idea for an affordable housing system, the people who can make this idea happen nationally, well, they sit in the government. And even if we'll pay the highest rate of tax, the people who will decide what to do with our money, they sit in the government. And even if we will protest for years for peace, the people who will be able to sign the agreement, they're in the government. So how can we be afraid of that? You know, if we had the courage to stand in front of 500,000 people and tell them that they should be hopeful because change is possible, we must have the courage to go and make this change happen, wherever we have to make it. So today, 2 years after that, I'm 28. I still live in a house share with 3 other housemates, and actually, just before I entered this talk, my landlord called to say that we have to leave the house in a few weeks because he's selling it. And I'm also a member of parliament. And although I still have my dreams about traveling the world or finishing my degree, for the next 10 years or 20 years, whatever needed, I'm going to do everything that I can to make the dreams of that protest come true. Thank you.